Howdy chaps, Alpern here. Didn't quite see you there. Today we're taking a look at the UKF meta build order. But we have already covered some of the other factions, so if you haven't, do make sure to check those out. And in the future we have a bunch of guides already lined up, so do subscribe to not miss out on those. Before we get into the build order itself, however, I would like to make a small disclaimer. I am not the most sophisticated UKF player out there, and thus I've done quite a bit of research for this particular guide. I've been asking around a lot and gathering all that information together with my own experience fighting versus UKF specifically, and this is basically the result of that, so let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Now, this build order analysis is mainly focused around 1v1s as per usual, since in team games there are really way too many variables to, really discuss anything in a comprehensible manner. So for UKF in 1v1s there are quite a few different openings that you can use, but let's begin with the arguably most common, which is being Lend-Lease. For Lend-Lease you generally start with a Vickers or a Mortar depending on your playstyle. And this is of course also interchangeable with a Royal Engineer squad in case you're going for a more mechanized build in the early game, but we'll get to that. Following this up, you call in 2 assault sections, which is where the main strength of this build derives from. The assault sections get access to a smoke once you get your Thompsons upgraded on them, and thus your munitions focus is going to be reaching those Thompsons. Once they hit Vet 1, they also get access to the White Phosphorus grenade, which is extremely strong given that it does not share cooldown with the smoke. Interestingly, in the super late game, there is of course also the option of taking grenades with this build, since it doesn't share cooldown with the White Phosphorus either, but it does of course share cooldown with the smoke, so keep that in mind. Following this up, you generally tech for anti-tank, which is either going to be the 6-pounder or the AAC. This is then followed up by another assault section. You can, as previously mentioned here, also go extremely mechanized, grabbing the M5 half-track, which sees a lot of play, both with the quad upgrade and without, using it as a forward reinforce point and a clown car. If these vehicles are built, and yes you can go for both, you do want to open the game with that Royal Engineer to make sure you get sweeper for tellers as well as repairs for your vehicles. After this, you generally grab the medics to get some healing, before going for an early tech Cromwell, which you can get quite fast since the assault sections doesn't require neither bolster nor weapon racks. As for the more traditional UKF build, you generally start with 2 infantry sections before grabbing either the UC or a 3rd section. After this, you want to tech up the company command post so that you can upgrade the UC with the Vickers. Now, the Vickers is far superior to the Wasp, so I would advise against going Wasp on the UC, simply because the Vickers is just better in the long range engagements, which you generally end up with the UC in the later stages of the game, as well as you get access to the suppression ability, which is quite nice. It's also of course cheaper than the Wasp, which makes it even more favorable. Following this up, the build can take 2 main separate paths. Either going for the Engineer, grabbing the Sweeper and then taking the AAC, or you go for an early bolster into another section and then the 6-pounder for anti-tank. This is very playstyle dependent, but both of these paths sees a lot of play. Now, out of all the UKF people I asked, everyone also made sure to tell me that bolster is in fact a must, and thus the AAC approach is usually followed up by grabbing the bolster as well. After this, both of these paths usually grab 1 more unit before teching, and it's quite open what unit you would like to get. Commonly you do see snipers, though if you're facing a camouflaged Ost here for instance, I would say a Mortar Pit or a Commando squad are very valid options, as well as even another section. If you're doing well here, you can go straight to tech for the Cromwell after this. However, if you're doing poorly, getting weapon racks is a strong contender before grabbing the Cromwell. As for the Assault Officer, he is quite a rare bird to spot, similarly to Panzer Grenadiers, and usually does not make a part of the most common builds. Now, transitioning into the late game, UKF has a difficult choice to make of either going Hammer or Anvil. I would say that neither of these is the de facto meta, as both of these options sees a lot of play with different strengths going for them. The hammer notably gets you access to the Comet, which is a strong late game brawler that you can phase out your Cromwells with. It also provides the access to the Gammon bombs for your sections, which can be very nice versus OKW specifically, since 3 of these bombs takes out the Schwerer, and it's quite easy to do with forward Schwerers and utilizing smoke. Notably, it also gets you access to an ability I can't quite remember the name of, but it provides extra vision on enemy vehicles that you hit, basically giving you enough vision to get an extra shot off in most circumstances. This ability works really nicely together with Fireflies or 6-pounders, as well as the Comet, and hence those units gets a nice spike in power with the hammer tech. As for the anvil tech, it gets you access to the Churchill, which is a decent all-rounder. It's also quite neat, because your Royal Engineers gets access to a strong upgrade, improving their repair speed significantly, which synergizes with the Churchill really well. This also makes hammer by far the best teching option if you're going for other heavy tanks such as the Crocodile or the AVRE, as you can quickly repair these vehicles using your upgraded engineers. Now, as for the late game composition as UKF, you can find yourself with such a wide variety of compositions, but very commonly you do end up with 3 to 4 infantry sections, and of course the AEC if it survives the early game, 2 engineers, 2 6-pounders, and 2 Cromwells, since most builds include a fast Cromwell, and it's common to follow it up with a second one before transitioning to super late game heavy tanks. Now, I plan to make a lot of these sort of guides in the future, and especially for KO3, so if you plan to pre-order KO3, please do use the link down below in the description and use code ELPERN on checkout. This helps me directly by giving me a cut of the purchase. Thank you, and thank you for watching.